Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
Today we've got another habitat and hunting update, kind of a migration alert spinoff here with Jay Anglin, our Waterfowl 360 Great Lakes migration editor. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Cool, man. So give us kind of an update, the Great Lakes states. I know you've got Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. You've got some kind of boots on the ground information for us. What's going on up there?
Well, we like so many hunters in this part of the country, the cold snap, the untimely cold snap back in, the first 10 days of November for like a week or so, very unusual cold spell. And the general consensus from everybody I've spoken with, my personal experiences, is that the birds that are due, really our peak mallard migration period, we were sort of encumbered by this ridiculously cold Arctic weather that froze all the marshes, started to freeze lakes. Snow cover wasn't a huge issue, but nonetheless, as Fred Zink alluded to this morning when I spoke to him, when those birds were in migration mode and they were rolling, and it's 17 degrees, midday, and there's ice underneath them, they just keep rolling. And so the southern states benefited tremendously from that, as I'm sure you know. That's certainly the tone of everything I'm hearing. And then, of course, some birds held out in particular areas that were carefully managed by guys that can hunt them or state properties. But we did lose a ton of birds, and it really hasn't filled in, unfortunately, since we thawed out.
Yeah, and I was up there. I was in Indiana last week for Thanksgiving, visiting family, and even some of the guys that I know who hunt pretty regularly in kind of the west central part of the state, they were kind of ho-hum about the whole situation. I can tell that the lack of weather following that cold snap has really kind of slowed down the momentum in that area. But you had mentioned something about Illinois, some of the guys who are managing property on that historical Illinois River area. What's that like right now? Well,
they have the numbers when you read them are staggering for anybody that doesn't live in that part of the country. You read the aerial, the weekly aerial inventories, and the numbers are staggering. But right now, the DNR will tell you readily that they're well below the 10-year average. And up until about just prior to the freeze up, really, some of the key players over there, Aaron Yetter at Forbes Biological Research Station in Havana, Randy Smith, who's one of the bigwig biologists in Illinois. These guys had a sort of an optimistic sort of, take on things like, we're going to get birds, everybody relax, they're coming. And then the tone changed about a week ago, and they were just like you mentioned, that ho-hum sort of, hey man, I don't know what's going to happen, but right now it's dismal. And in the last 24 hours, what I've done is I've really mined some information, and what I'm seeing is Wisconsin in particular still is holding really good numbers of mallards, in particular along the Mississippi and along Lake Michigan counties. They're dry feeding in corn, they're big hardy birds that have pushed out of Minnesota and Manitoba, and they've held on because there hasn't been a lot of snow in those areas. So I think those are the birds that everybody's been waiting for in parts of Indiana, maybe Southwest Michigan and Illinois. And that's critical because, our seasons are coming to an end here, quickly. Wisconsin is closed, which is unfortunate because that hunting pressure would help drive those birds out. But I do suspect that there are still some birds in the pipeline. How many remains to be seen, but there's a lot of glum faces, and it's understandable because it's been about a 3-week period here of just sort of, bewilderingly strange waterfowl hunting conditions.
Yeah, it looks like you guys are, you're right there in northern Indiana. It looks like your temperatures are going to drop out. Well, like Sunday night, Monday, and you're really going to start getting a little push of cold. Are you guys going to get any snow, or is it just going to be cold?
It's going to be really cold, and right now, it sounds like Lake Erie and Lake Michigan counties that are notorious for lake effect. I am literally sitting at the epicenter of Indiana's. Normally, we get the highest accumulations in my yard, I think, but we'll probably get some lake effect snow, as will some of the Lake Erie counties in Ohio. That's important because the birds that are holding out in these areas up here, it'll probably drive some of them. But I do think some of the birds up north, you get to this shorter day length, it's going to be frigid cold in some areas. And I think, with the day length, a lot of birds are just going to say, okay, enough is enough. And they're going to come down and fill in. That's, and it's not just me. I've talked to other hunters and we all feel about the same way. Like just in the nick of time here towards the end of the season up here anyway, we're going to get some new faces in the crowd because right now, a lot of our birds are very stale. Another thing I should bring up real quick, and Fred Zink alluded to this also earlier this week, Sunday, Monday, I noticed it here and he noticed it over there. These birds, in particular the mallards, just turned completely nocturnal. And what makes that remarkable is that it's not a full moon. The hunting pressure was relatively light, in my case and according to him in his area as well, because of the holiday. And interestingly, I mean, they've just gone completely nocturnal. So that's unusual behavior. He was sort of vexed by it and he said he's got some ideas, but I have my ideas, but bottom line is that hasn't made it any easier. So,
well, it sounds like it's pretty tough hunting up there right now. But I guess the silver lining to everything is this next weather front that's going to push through the Great Lakes region could produce what is potentially, like you said, some new faces in the crowd there. So we'll good luck up there and hope the weather changes for you and you end up getting some ducks.
Yeah, the guys that put in the most work are always the guys that end up probably having the most success, and you just have to keep working at it in these situations. That's certainly what I've done, and I've had success. The guys that just want to go out and plop down and get lucky, those guys probably aren't going to do that well. So yeah, it's the same. It's always the same. You keep doing it, and smile every time you finish because it's a great time to be out there. That's for sure. Cool.
Hey, I appreciate you joining me, Jay, and thanks a lot for coming on the show, and thanks for really pulling together this awesome information.
Hey, no problem. Look forward to the next time.
Thanks to Jay Anglin for joining the show today. Jay's our Waterfowl 360 Great Lakes Migration Editor and does a fantastic job with providing information to hunters in that region. And thanks to you, the listener, for listening to the Ducks Unlimited podcast and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.